Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much, Ms. Moss. This Health and Human Services Committee meeting is being held during the COVID-19 emergency declaration in accordance with Ohio's open meeting laws, as amended by sub HB 197. This meeting is being held using the Zoom platform and is being live streamed on YouTube and on Cleveland's Channel 20. It can also be seen on the Cleveland City Council website and from Council's Facebook page in accordance with Ohio Open Meetings regulations as amended by sub HB 197. Notice of this committee meeting hearing was publicly posted. The committee meeting will be conducted as all committee meetings in accordance with the council rules and Robert's rules of order. The chair will facilitate the meeting and call on persons to speak. If you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand option on Zoom. Please limit your comments to the matters before today's committee. As is the usual practice, any actions to be voted on during this committee will be done by voice vote, called and recorded by the committee clerk. The following meetings, once again, are held during the COVID-19 emergency declaration and will be conducted as virtual meetings in accordance with Ohio's open meeting laws. Today is a very important meeting. We'll be hearing a piece of legislation that will examine a commissioner position in the city of Cleveland. And I'll read the legislation. One second. All right. So the legislation that we will hear today is ordinance number 843-2020 by Mayor Jackson to create the Division of Health, Equality, and Social Justice within the Department of Public Health to supplement the codified ordinances of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976 by enacting new sections of 141.24 and 141.25, and to amend sections 37 and 41 of ordinance number 323-15, passed March 30th, 2015, as amended, relating to compensation for various classifications. Today, we will have remarks from the Chief of Prevention and Youth Opportunity, PIO, which is Tracy Martin, Prevention of Youth and Young Adult Opportunity, as well as Director Brian Kimball. And then we also have with us the Director of Human Resources, Nicole West. This is a very important piece of legislation. I will ask my colleagues to please, I will try to make this expeditious as possible, but we really need to keep a quorum. This is not a hearing. This is an actual piece of legislation that we are trying to pass out of committee. Therefore, we need to have a quorum of 4 people at all times. So I'm asking my colleagues to please coordinate and communicate closely with me. I would try to accommodate all of our schedules, but we really need to get this legislation heard. With that being said, I will turn the floor over to Ms. Tracy Martin Thompson. I apologize to my colleagues. There was a document that you were sent earlier this morning. Hopefully you were able to get that document. If you were not, please look at your email and the document is on there. But Ms. Thompson Martin will go over this document and then introduce members of her team. So Ms. Martin Thompson, you have the floor.
Okay, good morning, Council Chair and Council members. Thank you for having us here this morning. Today, we're here to talk to you about the creation of a new division within the Cleveland Department of Public Health, the Division of Health Equity and Social Justice. So, Councilman, I just want to make sure that we make a correction on that. In the document, it reads Division of Health Equality. It's actually Health Equity and Social Justice.
And I was wondering if that was the case, so I appreciate you making that correction. And Ms. Moss, I do believe we need to make sure we change that for the record. So if our attorneys are listening, could you please make sure that we do make that correction, Ms. Tilley and our attorneys?
So today, I'm sorry, Councilman.
I'm sorry, our attorney is going to advise us if we need to make that amendment. Go ahead. You're on mute, sir. You're on mute. Our attorney is on mute.
I thought I wasn't. Yeah, I'll look into that. I'll check with Nancy and see if we need to make that, or if that well, that looks like that's an easy switch. So let me check back on that.
By the end of the meeting, because you let us know, because if we do have to make that amendment,
I will.
We do it at the table.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Ms.
I'll do
Martin.
that, Chair.
Okay, so for today's presentation, what we would like to do is to provide you a little bit of context and background to help you to understand how we got here today. Secondly, then we want to discuss the work that is and will take place in the Department of Health that's critical to the development of this particular new division. Third, we want to discuss why the division was created and its overall purpose. Fourth, we want to explain how the city defines health equity and social justice, because this is important because it served as the basis for why the mayor created this division and its overall purpose. The fifth thing we'd like to do is to provide you an overview of the organizational structure of the division. And last, what we'd like to do is provide a high-level overview of the timeline that outlines and defines the next steps as relates to this work. To get us started this morning, I'm going to turn it over to Director Nicole West, who serves as our HR Director. She's going to start off with providing you some background and contextual information to help you to understand how we got to this point. So Director West.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sure each of you remember that earlier this year, Human Resources, along with individuals from the Office of the Mayor, launched an investigation. Our investigation, we looked into several things. We opened an EEO complaint. We reviewed the loss of the HIV STI grant. We reviewed vacancies, hiring, and attrition within CDPH. We also looked at employee morale and culture within the department. Once those things were looked at, in addition, and in light of the mayor's concerns about the root causes of health inequity and its impacts on our citizens, City Council also passed legislation formally declaring racism as a public health issue. We examined how we position CDPH to address those social determinants of health that negatively impact the quality of life in the populations that we serve, especially those marginalized populations. So that's a kind of high-level overview of how we looked at all of the things that we were reviewing in public health. Now, when we talked about our key findings, we identified some of those, and I want to remind each of you what those were. So what did we learn throughout our investigation? We learned that there was poor internal communication, there was a lack of leadership in several areas, there was poor employee culture and climate, and some staff members were unclear about their roles and responsibilities. CDPH, as each of you know, have several current programs which focused on eliminating health equities and disparities and advancing equity for our community. However, CDPH did not have clear systems and structures in place to lead this work on a larger scale that we're talking about right now with establishing this division. So as a result, we wanted to fully position the department to tackle and eliminate these issues associated with the social determinants of health and the impact of the health and the overall well-being of all residents, especially those at highest risk and highest need populations. So once we did our investigation, once we knew what our central findings were, we knew that we had to have some outcomes. What actions were we going to take to address the things that we found? So as a result of those findings, we put things into two large categories. The first was phase one, or our reorganization and stabilization phase. That's the work that we've been doing this entire time. We had to identify the critical needs and gaps that had to be addressed immediately and long-term. While we knew things could take action right now, we knew that this was going to take time. Nothing was going to be a quick fix because we wanted sustainable long-term change. We wanted to take the appropriate steps and require a response to begin laying out that foundation and requirements for us to address these systemic issues that we found. So that was phase one, the reorganization and stabilization phase. Phase two, that's our transformation change. That's how we continue to build upon the work that's already been going on in CDPH. How do we continue our traditional programs and services offered at CDPH? How do we work to create structures and systems within CDPH to lead our efforts? How do we make sure that those things are interrelated and identify and eliminate systemic patterns for those who are disadvantaged, those who are challenged, and how do we increase the well-being and quality for those that are desperate for those services, those high-need populations. So the reorganization and stabilization, what short-term actions have we taken? As you know, we did a comprehensive reorganization of the department. We did several professional development series. We formed a committee to review hiring on a weekly basis within CDPH. We're looking at attrition. We're modifying job descriptions. We're reviewing the loss of the HIV STI grant, and we're reviewing all other grants within the department to ensure that we have centralized focus on grant management. We're looking at employee morale and culture, and we're also looking at how employees are interacting with supervisory leadership to make sure that there's clear lines of communication. So that is kind of our overview, our purpose, the 2 phases that we're looking at. Next, Tracy's going to get a little bit more into phase 1.
So as a part of phase 1, one of the other things that we're looking at are, okay, what are our next steps? So as Nicole mentioned, we conducted an investigation, and that provided us some information as to what was going on in the department. In order to get a deeper level understanding of what's happening in the department and the next steps that we should take, it requires us to do a deep dive. And so one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to issue an RFP for an outside consultant to come in to conduct a diagnostic review. And what a diagnostic review provides us is an opportunity to look at really what's going well in the organization and where there's an opportunity for improvement, or opportunities, excuse me, for improvement. And we'll use this information to improve the overall operational efficiencies as to what's happening in CDPH. And so during a diagnostic review, I want to just talk a little bit about some of the key areas that we will actually have that consultant to look at. So first off, we want the consultant to examine the organizational structures and systems. And what I mean by that is we want to understand, how does the work in CDPH get done? How are people organized? Who makes or influences the decisions in the department? What policies and procedures are in place that guide the work of the staff? What mechanisms are in place to ensure responsibility and accountability for meeting expectations? Do the systems that are in place support staff in getting their work done effectively and efficiently? The second area we want to look at is organizational development and effectiveness. That helps us to understand, has CDPH created an environment in which employee performance, professional development, and accountability are all aligned and also a part of a continuous improvement model? Does the employee onboarding process appropriately prepare employees to meet performance expectations and understand how to successfully navigate the ins and outs of City Hall, so to speak? Do employee job descriptions provide job candidates and employees a clear and accurate description of what their jobs actually entail? We also want to look at resources. And when I talk about resources, I'm not only talking about financial resources, but also people, technology. We want to understand, how are resources really allocated? Is the manner in which the resources are allocated consistent with the overarching goals and objectives of the department? What knowledge and skills do individuals in the department need in order to meet performance expectations? And are we appropriately allocating those resources to help people to meet those expectations? How are we investing in the development of the people who are there? Do we have the technology infrastructure required to meet our goals and objectives of the department? We also want to look at climate and culture to a more in-depth level. We need to understand, what does CDPH really value and believe? And does the organization behave in a manner that is consistent with these beliefs? What norms are in place, and do these norms support desired behaviors? Does the existing culture support or hinder staff's ability to do their work? How does the staff feel about the work environment and why? We also want to look at stakeholders. We need to understand, who are our real stakeholders as it relates to our work? Are our goals and objectives clearly understood by our stakeholders? How do we work with our stakeholders, and are their efforts aligned with ours? So as a part of this diagnostic review, those are some of the key areas that we will have that consultant to look at. We'll also have them to look at other areas that will be examined as a part of the process. And again, all of this data will be utilized to help guide our next steps as it relates to the reorganization and stabilization phase. But this information will also help us to advance our efforts as it relates to phase 2, which we call the transformation process, or the transformation phase. So next, we want to begin talking about the transformation phase, and we want to begin to talk in more detail specifically about the creation of the Division of Health Equity and Social Justice. And in this, what we want to do is to start off by talking about the purpose of the division and why it was created. So I'm going to turn it over to Director West, who is going to start talking about that area. Director West.
So one of the primary portions of phase 2, as Tracy said, is the creation of this division. The transformation stage has many purposes and parts, but one of the biggest is this transformation of and creation of this division. And again, it's the Division of Health Equity and Social Justice. As a city, we believe that social justice serves as the lens that we must examine the quality of health and well-being for those who have been impacted the most by systemic challenges that serve as chronic impediments to growth and success. We're going to look at the root causes of many of these health threats, which are notably linked to the social determinants of health and the overall conditions that shape a person's opportunity to thrive and achieve their full potential, regardless of their race, ethnicity, social or economic status. A critical part of this is ensuring that all people are able to attain positive health outcomes, is to identify and eliminate patterns of systemic disadvantage that thwart well-being marginalized populations. Such an effort requires strategic and comprehensive methodology. What is that? So we know that the magnitude and intricate nature of this work warrants the development of the appropriate infrastructure like the creation of this division. We want to make sure that this division advances and sustains the complex fundamental changes that are required to ensure all City of Cleveland residents are able to thrive and survive quality lives. Recognizing this, the mayor created a new organizational structure specifically designed to support this advancement with these efforts. That's the Division of Health Equity and Social Justice. This will be, of course, a division within the Department of Public Health. So I want to make sure that each of you understands how we as a city are defining health equity and social justice, because I think it's very important that we as a city identify what we mean so that residents and each of you understand how we're using these terms. So we're creating a framework that requires a shared understanding. So here are some of the terms that we're using. First, health equity. Health equity is achieved when every person has the opportunity to attain his or her full health potential. No one is disadvantaged from achieving this potential because of social position or other social determinant circumstances. Health inequities are reflected in differences in the length of life, the quality of life, rates of disease, disability, death, and severity of disease, and access to treatment. All right, so that's how we're defining health equity, by those terms, we, the City of Cleveland. When we talk about social determinants of health, right, we're talking about the conditions which people are born, grow, live, work, and age, as well as the complex interrelated social structures and economic systems that shape these conditions. Social determinants of health include all aspects of the social environment. What is the social environment? Discrimination, income, education level, marital status, the physical environment, the place of your residence, growing condition, crowding conditions, your built environment, the building spaces, transportation systems, anything that's created or modified by people, health services. Those are the products that are created to determine access and quality of healthcare, insurance status. Those are all the things that we're calling the social determinants of health. These social determinants of health are linked to a lack of opportunity and a lack of resources to protect, to improve, and to maintain health. All of these things taken together, those are the factors that are mostly responsible for health inequities in our view. The unfair and unavoidable differences in these health statuses, which are seen between these populations. And some of this, of course, comes from things that we know and known institutions like the CDC and those institutions. The kind of the lens, as I said, that we're looking at all of this is social justice. Social justice is that all people should have equal access to wealth, health, well-being, justice, and privileges. Those opportunities should be available to them, again, regardless of their race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. In terms of public health, social justice is a belief that all people are afforded equitable access to health care and knowledgeable resources. So when we're talking about our definitions, I wanted to be very careful that we are speaking the same language, we're using the same terms, and that you as our legislative body understands what we're saying and how we're using those terms, because terms are communicated interchangeably, and we want to avoid that confusion.
So thank you, Nicole. So next, what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about the organizational structure of the new division. So overseeing the new division will be a commissioner that we'll bring on board, a commissioner who will oversee the Division of Health Equity and Social Justice. In terms of staffing support for that individual, what we want to do is to make certain that that individual has an opportunity to come on board, conduct the necessary review of data, create a strategic plan, begin to prioritize, and based upon that strategic plan, that individual will have an opportunity to create the organizational structure that they deem is necessary in order to actually implement that plan. So we want to make certain that that individual comes on board first and is a part of the process of creating the organizational structure. As a part of this effort, the other thing that we're going to do is we will examine the other current existing CDPH programs that are in place. And we want to look at how do we identify, or if we identify any links between current existing programs and the new division. And we want to ensure that there is direct alignment between the work that takes place in the division and the work that takes place in the programs that currently exist in CDPH. So that provides you all an overview of the division, the role and responsibilities of the commissioner. I'm not going to go and read through all of that because you have a copy of that document that outlines the duties and responsibilities of that individual. But next, what I'd like to talk about briefly is about the next steps. So after we get approval from City Council, our next step is to move forward with actually posting position. Our goal is to hire that new commissioner before the end of the first quarter of 2021. And so as soon as that individual comes on board, he or she will begin working with existing committees and initiatives that are already in place. But then that person will begin, as I said before, to examine specifically the data that's already available and out there, pull other data sources that they need to bring in to make some determinations as to how we will move forward, developing that strategic plan, identifying the priorities, and then laying out the organizational structure that he or she needs in order to move forward with implementing this initiative and moving forward. So that provides all of you an overview of the work that will take place as it relates to this new division. And now we'll just stop and leave it open for any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much. And I know we're going to have a lot of questions and robust questions by my council colleagues. And I just want to say that, wow, this is a huge day for the city of Cleveland, that we're actually taking these bold steps in order to address some of these issues that we know keep our community behind, not just the African-American community, but the Latino, Latinx community, as well as other poor and disenfranchised communities across the city of Cleveland. We've seen it evidenced with a lot of us on the front line. So this is very important to a lot of us. A lot of us have championed this for a long time. I know that my colleague, Councilman Jones, is, this is his baby. He's been talking about this since he's come into council. So I know this is a proud day for him to finally see this really start to take shape. But we want to make sure that this works, and we want to make sure that this goes. So let me make sure if I could surmise a couple of things, and then I'll turn it over to the vice chair, who is Councilman McCormick, for questions. And then any of my other colleagues that have questions, please use the raise hand function, and I will make sure that I put you on the agenda accordingly. But first and foremost, let me make sure that I understand this. This is an internal review of just the health department that this consultant would do. And this consultant will focus on that. We'll have to approve a consultant in the near future. That's not on the table right now. And this commissioner is not going to be that consultant. But in the future, you plan to propose to bring a consultant to us in order to examine the operations of the health department. Is that correct?
That's correct, Councilman.
Okay, so we're talking about kind of two different processes and procedures. And I really appreciated Director West's points of definitions, because a lot of people don't realize that sometimes when they talk about, these issues, it turns into how do we examine all the city departments.
Right.
And I will tell you that that is something that, there are departmental weaknesses that we all need to address and that we do need to look at through our processes. But this specific consultant will look at the health department. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's
Okay. All right. So I wanted to make sure we clarified that. But then in addition, this commissioner that we're looking at today, they're not only looking at the internal processes, but they're looking at everything from the built environment to the social determinants of health, to social justice, to all of these other issues that we know that people deal with that geographically impact parts of Cleveland that make life difficult, as well as people actually die or have lower life expectancy and have other problems to attain their full potential. You're going to examine those things too.
Exactly. So, Councilman,
Would that include this person looking at other systems and partners? Because one of the things that we're really looking at with our committee that we've been putting together is how does systemic racism address housing and infrastructure and environment or water and those kind of issues? How does it deal with wealth? How does it inhibit us from being able to obtain wealth? How does it deal with our education system? How is it creating impediments to do that? How is it dealing with health disparities, where there's a lower life expectancy of 20 years in many of our neighborhoods compared to some of the affluent suburbs? I know I represent the Woodland Hills neighborhood that has the lowest life expectancy in all of Cuyahoga County, which is unacceptable. And then not to underscore this, but also really kind of help us look at issues like the criminal justice system.
Absolutely.
Not just police reform, but the bail reform, the conditions of our jail, those things. So this is a massive job, okay?
Yeah.
And I just want to put it in context because this is going to take a lot of data, a lot of research, moving a lot of parts at the same time, and really trying to coordinate a lot of agendas, because a lot of people have different agendas.
Yes.
So tell me how you envision this person being able to deal with this massive, complex system, systemic racism that we're seeing, and how do you envision them being able to interchange between all of these different issues?
So, Councilman, the first thing is this, and this is the reason why we stated that once that individual comes on board, we want to provide he or she the opportunity to look at the data that's in existence, what is currently going on as relates to responding to these issues, as relates to health equity and the social determinants of health. And from there, that individual is able to design a strategic plan that lays out specifically our priorities, what we're going to tackle first, how they're going to go about tackling those particular issues, and then who needs to be at the table, and then the organizational structure they need to have in place in order to move forward with this work. So as you noted, all of those areas are absolutely massive. You just laid out all those social determinants of health. So they are absolutely huge and massive. So it will definitely take time. And so that individual needs to have that opportunity to come in and essentially chunk those pieces out to really lay out specifically what will get done first, how they'll move forward, the strategies, what will be needed in terms of support, resources, and the timeline for getting that work done. So we want that individual to come in and have an opportunity to sit with us to talk through that, to look at that data, and then map out that plan.
Great. And I know a lot of these questions will be reiterated once we get this commissioner, but one of the things that I really hope that we do is that I'm gonna use a statement from Councilman Conwell that what gets measured gets managed. You know, you can't manage what you can't measure.
Absolutely.
So have you already begun to look at what kind of capital needs you have in order to be able to get this data and to be able to have the expertise that you need? Or are you going to realign and redesign staff like epidemiologists or other folks within the health department to work closely with this person? Because there's a lot of statistical analysis. And as much as I know that people want to touch, feel, and see change, people also want to just understand, how are we going to measure this? How are we going to actually show that is more African Americans on the police department, more African Americans on the fire department, more, you know, that we have, you know, we reduce the lower life expectancy by a certain amount of years. How are you going to look at models, or is this person going to look at examples like Milwaukee and other places to really trying to make sure that we have a measuring tool to make sure we have this?
So the answer to that question is, Councilman, is absolutely. They will look at different models that already exist. Based upon that, then they will lay out specifically, what do we need here specifically for the city of Cleveland in order to help move this work forward. So that person, again, as a part of designing their organizational structure, will let us know specifically what do they need in terms of data experts, so to speak, or team of data experts, whether that's epidemiologists, people who specialize in urban city planning, looking at how do we pull all this information together to provide them the kind of information they need to make decisions as we move forward. So that person will have an opportunity to lay out specifically, again, what do they need in terms of that support based upon models that currently exist, and then looking at what do we need specifically for their work as relates to the city of Cleveland.
Great. And hopefully, Chief, if you get an opportunity, I really think that we need to have the universities involved with this. Hopefully we'll look at local universities. It's been my experience, when you bring in outside universities or college institutions, they charge an exorbitant amount. But I think we have some great opportunities to really pull in Case Western Reserve and Cleveland State University. And in addition, I know I'm piling on this thing because it's so important, but also I hope that they are looking at other new technologies like the fiber optics and our connectivity in the city, because that is also something that's being affected by this. I know that's some of the work that the broader committee is doing. A couple more questions and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. One is, will you look at training, and what organizations are you looking at the city aligning with? For example, a lot of us, I think myself and Councilman Bashir Jones, are on the REAL, Race, Equity, and Leadership Council for National League of Cities. But then you have GARE, which is Government Alliance on Race and Equity. However, there are inward-facing organizations where you get certified when you examine your own government operations. Mm-hmm. And then you have people that are in our own backyard that are two dynamic people with Evelyn Burnett and Mordecai Cardigill with Third Space that are really doing REI. Mm-hmm. So how are you looking to deal with other groups to work on the city to get certified with our internal processes, as well as some of the external agencies that can help us look at the impact that some of these race and equity issues have on our society?
Mm-hmm. So first, let me just note again, as that individual comes in and we lay out and look specifically at what is needed in terms of professional development, what is needed in terms of training, that will be a part of that overall strategic plan. One of the things that we want to definitely avoid doing is having hodgepodge workshops that people participate in. And the reason why I say that is that it's important to note that when we send people to workshops and they don't really get their arms around or don't fully grasp what we're trying to gain from this and how do I apply that to my day-to-day work, then we're missing out on a really important opportunity to move this work forward. So we want to make this a part of a larger comprehensive professional development plan that's aligned with that overall strategic plan, so that when we design the professional development, it's designed in a manner that will actually help to change practice, will actually inform policy development and policy changes and the work that we do as we move ahead. I'll also turn it over to Director West. She may have some comments that she wants to know also about some of the work that HR is taking and moving forward with this type of, in this side of the agenda also. So Nicole?
So on the employee side of things, we've already begun partnering with some local entities such as the Diversity Center, where we have already begun to launch a series of training, to Tracy's point, not the hodgepodge training, but it's series training to start developing those knowledge, skills, and abilities so that we can actually have application. We don't want to do check the box training. We don't want to train just to train, right? When we provide training, we want to educate, we want to inform, we want to change policy, and we want to be able to measure those behavioral changes. So when we look at curriculum, when we look at training series, when we look at coursework, we want to understand how can we consistently build upon this training, and then how do we make sure that there is enough time in between those trainings to make sure that application and proper measurements of behavioral change are demonstrated from those series.
Okay. All right. All right. The other thing that I wanted to make sure that I took, the other thing that I wanted to make sure that we look at is this going to be funded by the general fund, or is it going to be grant funded? How are we going to look at that?
Councilman, general fund.
General fund?
Yes.
So even if we have additional positions that we want to add to this, it'll still be general fund.
It will be general fund. That does not mean that when that commissioner comes on board that we won't identify grant opportunities that will be utilized to enhance what's going on in the office or the division. However, the core of the funding will be through the general fund budget.
Okay. All right. And the only other thing that I would make a suggestion that we do is that we really need to make sure that we get the public's impact for this. Sometimes professionals get in the room and they talk to each other and they talk the same language, but we don't really get the pulse of what the community and what the city and what our stakeholders really think about what we're trying to do. And I don't want us to get into the point of using illustrious words and not having real, true community engagement and partnership in this. So I just hope that that's part of the process. With that being said, I do have my vice chair of the committee, which is Carrie McCormick, and then Councilman Bashir Jones, who was also one of the co-sponsors of the Racism as a Public Health Crisis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you having this conversation this morning. A very important conversation. And I think what is, there's many reasons why this is appropriate and important, but, we talk a lot about how do we dive into root causes of issues in our community. And to me, this is a big step forward in addressing root cause issues in our community. If we're serious, Mr. Chairman, about the inequities in our community, then we've got to identify them and we've got to be honest about that. So I appreciate that. Mr. Chair, I would suggest or request that you, myself, and anyone else be added to this ordinance as well. I don't see any council members on it, so I think that would be appropriate. Chair, again, I'm fully supportive of this piece. One important piece that I do want to address on it, though, and I've read over it before and I just went through it again. I don't see the terminology around racism or racial equity anywhere in this piece. And the reason I bring that up is that I think language matters and intent matters. And while I appreciate the language around health equity and social justice, as we've seen, Mr. Chair, whether it is infant mortality, whether it is, lending practices throughout our neighborhoods, toxic stress, all sorts of different issues. We know that many of those are rooted in systemic racism. And I think it's important for the city and for the council to spell that out and to call that out when we have these conversations and not be afraid to engage in that conversation. Again, Mr. Chairman, that would be to the idea of if we want to really understand what the root causes are and what those impacts are, we need to call it out. And so it's not in this piece at all. The word racism doesn't appear once. So I would suggest that before we get to finance, that we really look at including that in the description of this position, because we know that, Mr. Chairman, that systemic racism is interwoven in this conversation, very much so. So that's just one comment. I mean, I'd love to see it in the title of this position, but if not, I think within the description of this position and the legislation, that we ensure that we're calling that out. So just.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm going to ask Councilman if we can clarify, because I just looked at the ordinance again, 843-2020. So
Right.
what we're asking for and what we're voting on, what we will vote on today, is to approve that commissioner.
Right.
So want to make sure I get clarification. Do you believe that somewhere in describing this commissioner's title or the mission of this department, that it should have racism in there? Or are you saying in the body of work of the document that it should actually have racism embedded in there and addressing racism?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it should be directly in the ordinance. So if you look at section 141.25, Commissioner of Health, Equity, and Social Justice shall administer the health code and see that all ordinances and rules of the city of Cleveland are applicable, state laws, blah, blah, blah. He or she shall supervise the work of several bureaus, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so shall examine and address health inequities across the city of Cleveland. We're also referencing health, equity, and social justice. Again, Mr. Chair, I just think it's important that we, in the body of this, spell that out as a primary topic or a primary concern of this position, because again, I don't see how we address health, equity, and social justice without directly speaking about and addressing racism. So I think in whether it's 141.25 is probably the appropriate place. I think it's important that we call out racism.
All right, so I'm gonna ask for a little guidance from our attorney on this, because it looks like there would need to be a amendment, but what I'm not sure is, do we have to do an entire new piece of legislation to address 141.25, or can we add Councilman McCormick's amendment to this piece? Attorney Armstrong, can you give us?
Yes, I'm here, Chairman. I was just thinking, I'm sorry. I mean, I think you would have to, we could look into where he was looking at it.
And I don't have a specific amendment, Chair, to offer right now. The point, I think, is just more so of adding that language to the description, at some point in the legislative process. Again, and this is not to, Chair, to take away from my support. I have strong support for this. I'm just saying, I think that it's important that we call out, these root causes of these issues.
So what I would recommend, if we could, what I would strongly recommend, is that we move forward with this commissioner position, and then let's examine 141.25. And I think it might be good to actually work with the new commissioner to look at other language within our codified ordinances that we might need to add what you're talking about, because I agree, to make sure that we have the right verbiage of what we're really trying to address, and make sure that our resolutions as well as our ordinances are aligned, because we specifically said we want to deal with racism, and also we know that this is trying to deal with racism as well as these other equitable issues.
Yep.
So what we'll do is we'll deal with the commissioner, and then one of the tasks, if we could, Chief, if that commissioner can really make recommendations to council at the right time on what language we need to look at in our codified ordinances, specifically pertaining to 141.25, that we can actually make amendments to address and be more clear on what we're trying to address. Is that fair, Councilman McCormick?
So, Chair, just as a quick, 141.25 is the duties of this new commissioner. So what I'm saying is I agree. I think we should move forward with this. Absolutely. I'm just saying, before a final vote, I'm just proposing that in the duties of the Commissioner of Health, Equity, and Social Justice, we do intentionally call out racism. So I don't know exactly how that's written or worded, and I don't know that Chair, that it needs to slow this down at all. I think it can move, along, because I would imagine, Chair, this piece will then go to Finance and then Committee of the Whole. So just a suggestion that we use that terminology in this piece.
I totally agree, and you have my commitment that we'll work closely on finalizing that and making sure by the time we get in front of Finance that we'll clarify that language and make sure that we do whatever we need to address that, okay?
Thank you, Chair. And again, I don't want to be a stickler. I just think it's important that we're intentional about this language as we have these conversations about root causes and what contributes to those social determinants of health. Chair, the only other thing I would say too is that, again, as you touched on earlier too, big fan of Chief Martin, so I'm excited that she's spearheading this initiative for the city of Cleveland. Chair to the Chief, as is Councilman, or as Chairman Griffin noted earlier, there are working groups both at the county and the city level, of course, as well as interdepartmental conversations at the city. And so I'm curious too, if you see this position too as a convener or as a, because obviously there'll be specific work within the health department, but this is a broader conversation in the community. So Chief, do you see this position too as somewhat of a convener of folks on this issue?
Councilman, through the chair, Councilman, absolutely. This will be a convener also of pulling all of the individuals together. So to make certain that we're all speaking the same common language, we're all on the same page and moving this work forward. So definitely so. And then if I can just also just note, Councilman, and we will go back and make certain to update the job description to make certain that we specifically spell out racism. The reason we didn't is because racism is included as part of the social determinants of health, but we will definitely go in and specifically speak to that directly.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, and to the Chief as well. And it's good, Chair, I'm happy too that Director West is on the call too, and her commitment to kind of the city as a whole. She knows that every time we've got budget hearings, we discuss training and how important it is that across the city, right, whether you are working at a rec center or in the finance department or wherever, that the employees of the city of Cleveland are up to date on trainings, educations, and are given the tools possible to ensure that as an organization, we are aware of and operating in, a sensitive manner to these issues. Because again, as a city, we got to put our money where our mouth is. And it's exciting to see that this investment, Chief, I think is so important in this creation of this position, and as well as throughout human resources practices throughout the city. So I applaud our director being on here as well. But again, Chair, with that, just a suggestion, I support this ordinance. And again, to me, it's critically important that we don't put our heads in the sand around the issues that are facing our community and why our outcomes are the way they are, better understanding that and putting the resources in to address that. Councilman, as you note, you often talk about, planting trees that you're never going to be able to sit underneath their shade. And I think that this is one of those examples of we can't be afraid, Mr. Chair, of putting things in place that may not see immediate results, but that are important structures to address issues that in decades from now, we will, be seeing the effects. And in decades from now, we will, this work will continue. So I think it's a bold move, and it's, not often do elected officials or others have enough courage to put systems in place that don't have a quick return. So I'm happy to see that, and that doesn't say that we can't have some quick wins, but Chair, I think it's good that we're looking at the long-term systems here when we address this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much, Councilman McCormick. You brought up some great points, and I will tell you that you are exactly right. I've learned that you have to be clear, quick, concise, and you also have to have a sense of urgency because people are not willing to continue to wait to fix these systemic challenges that we have. I also would ask if Antilli, I believe that Councilman McCormick also asked, and I'm going to request as well, that myself, Councilman McCormick, Councilman Jones, and any other council person that raised Councilwoman Santana, that they are also added as co-sponsors of this piece of legislation. Okay, so could you please make sure that those additions are made for the finance meeting, if everyone can make that. I have Councilman Bashir Jones, who has really been an advocate for this, and I want to make sure that we give him the time he needs because he's really been interested in this topic since he's come on. So, Councilman Jones, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Chair. I truly appreciate it, man. You know, this is absolutely amazing. You know, right after removing Donald Trump, and we have this. My God, this is beautiful, man. We're going in the right direction, man. We're going in the right direction. So,
and even though we're not supposed to say anything political, I approve this.
I'm sure everyone seconds that. Anyway, but you know, ever since, Chairman, I came to this position, I know that I just want to say to my colleagues, man, I appreciate your patience with me. And I know sometimes it can come across as comedic from, you know, what's up with this big painting inside City Hall chambers, to, you know, how we making sure we're hiring people, to, you know, making sure that we have diversity in our safety forces. You know, every step of the way, I've strived to just try to be a blatant voice and not even tiptoe around it, but to be speak to the heart of the matter. And I just want to say I really appreciate you all, especially the people who are on here, you know, who have really supported me and stood with me during this time. Because it's not hard. It's hard to create a removal of Columbus Day and 300 grandparents from Little Italy shows up. And you know, that's tough to do, man. But it's I think that it's our duty. This is why we're here. So I really appreciate Councilman McCormick, man. I really appreciate him, man. He has always been, you know, stood with me, and in some cases preceded me, you know, in speaking about these issues. Councilman Santana as well has been not only open but also just, you know, just the silent comforter, you know, to keep pushing and keep moving on. And Chairman Griffin, you know, thank you. I know sometimes I'm getting an Oscar right now, but Chairman Griffin, thank you for, you know, your leadership in this capacity, just making sure that we push and fight. And I just want to say I appreciate the mayor. You know, I believe that the mayor, no one can tell me that he doesn't lack love for this city. No way you can serve this city this long and you don't love it. I don't believe that one bit, and I won't let anyone say anything opposite. I may not agree all the time, but I have the utmost respect for Mayor Jackson. And as we approach this political season, I'm telling people openly, we will not tolerate anyone, you know, disrespecting Mayor Jackson and his legacy, because what he has done is absolutely phenomenal. And I appreciate him. I appreciate him for this. This is amazing. And I just thank everybody who was a part of it. It really means a lot. And I just close with just reiterating what Councilman McCormick said, that we have to be blatant in saying systematic racism, because that's what it is. And this consultant, though this may be, we probably can't do this because this is probably doing the exact opposite of what we tell people that they can't do. But that consultant should be a Black woman, and she should be from outside of Cleveland, and she should be able to come in here and clean this thing up for us. And I'm hoping that this is the beginning, because I would argue that we need even a person like this, or even a department like this, to look at every department within the city, because I'm sure if we were to take a look at our hiring practices, if we were to take a look at the consultant contracts that the city gives out, like there should be eyes on all of that, so that we look in the next 5 to 7 years, or 10 years for that matter, and our workforce truly reflects the demographics of the city. So this is huge. This is an amazing collaboration of administration and council and, you know, our chiefs and directors. It always take some sisters to clean some stuff up, man. So anyway, I appreciate y'all for cleaning this stuff up. I don't know. Now that Trump is gone, I'm even more blatant in what I need to say. I ain't mincing my words, man. This is what it is. I appreciate you all so much. I'm so thankful to you, because we can't say that we declare racism a public health crisis and we are the biggest purveyors of racist practices. We can't do that as a city. And I believe under the leadership of Chief Martin and Director West, I believe that we can truly begin to make the change that this city needs to make. And Commissioner Kimball, you too, you're great as well. Don't get me wrong. But you know, we need for us to truly make that change legislatively. So I'm very thankful. I appreciate it. Chairman Griffin, thank you for your work. Thank you for your leadership. And this is going to be phenomenal for our city. And also, I believe it's going to be an example that other surrounding cities begin to implement, because we are the big brother of Northeast Ohio, or Ohio for that matter. And we want to be a good example. So, Chairman, thank you again. Chief Director, thank you. To my councilman colleagues, thank you for your patience with me. And thank you for standing with me. And yes, this was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. And I know you've been working very hard, man, to make this happen. And the one thing, like I told you before, I just want to throw alley oops. I'm like the PowerPoint guard, you know, just throw it to you guys and let you guys get it done, man. And proud to serve with you and Councilman McCormick and Councilwoman Santana, because you've really been leading this. Which leads me to my friend, Councilwoman Santana. I know you didn't raise your hand, but I definitely would love for you to make comments, because this is very important to
Yeah,
you and your community.
I raised my hand, Chair. I don't know why it didn't come up. So, so thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a great day. This has been a great couple of days. And you know what? Yeah, we have a woman of color as VP. So I'm going to celebrate that every day. And I know we're not supposed to speak, you know, political, but we're excited, you know. And so what I'm excited about, the little girls everywhere now know that everything's possible. So I'm going to keep repeating that. So that's exciting. But this is huge. Congratulations, Mr. Chair, and, you know, Councilman Bashir. I know you guys been talking about this for quite some time. Congratulations, Major, you know, Frank Jackson and administration, Chief Thompson and Director West. Thanks for the information you shared. You know, I appreciate all this. And, you know, the first step is always to identify and admit, right, that there's systematic racism. And it does exist. Back then, we didn't label it that way. As, you know, when I was working out as a community outreach worker, you know, we just knew that there was, you know, and, you know, there was housing issues within our neighborhood, mental health, trauma, and all these terms, social determinant, you know, issues that would come up, but there was no label to them. We just know that our communities were suffering. So the first step, you know, you guys introduced, we introduced declaring racism as a public crisis. I did receive calls like, what is the next step? And so here we are creating a position that will address, you know, racism. So congratulations, I'm excited. So as far as the commissioner position, you know, I just want to share that, you know, I worked with the health department for many years, even prior to being elected. There were several employees. I mean, there's a lot of employees that are very passionate about this, and they're connected to, you know, to groups in the Latino community and so forth. They've been doing this work for many years. We don't, you know, hear about them much, but they've been out there and they're passionate. So I guess in my experience of creating new programs, the majority of the work is developing those relationships, right? Nurturing those relationships. So, you know, I'm curious to know, are we looking internally? And I know my colleague, Councilman Bashir, is like, you know, external, but, you know, there's always someone internally. Like I said, they're working behind the scenes, they're working hard. They believe in this type of work and, you know, just need opportunity to shine, right? And so, you know, are we giving employees opportunity to apply before searching externally?
To the councilwoman through the chair, what we will do is to go through our traditional process of posting. And at that time, we will allow anyone to respond to the posting, including internal candidates. I believe you're absolutely right. We have a lot of passionate, wonderful gems that work in the health department that really contribute and give a lot to this effort and to this work. And so we want to encourage those individuals as well to apply for the position. We are trying to make certain that this is a very transparent and open process. And so we are just adhering to just the procedures we have in place through the HR department. But again, we definitely want to encourage individuals who are working in the health department currently or anywhere else in the city who have an interest or passion about this work to apply. But again, I want to underscore, and I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with you. We have a lot of wonderful individuals who are doing some great work in the health department who are already very much committed to this effort. Definitely so.
All right, thank you for that. And Chair, and we've talked about this and you brought this up in other committees, the importance of data gathering. I was so shocked when I first started here that there's no software that collects data. And I think every council member is like sitting on this like mine of data that we've collecting through Excel sheets. So I just wanna propose that, you know, the city prioritizes obtaining a software, you know, to collect data and, you know, possibly reaching out to council members to collect the data that's already in place. That's going to be important to kind of move forward and really address, you know, what's happening in our neighborhoods. And then lastly, I just kind of want to talk about, you know, just remember this position, you know, Latinos are the fastest growing population out there. And you could see by the statistics, you know, they really came out to vote. And so we are here. So I want to make sure that, you know, this position is, you know, is mindful that we are here and that we need bilingual material, that, you know, we need someone that really could understand the struggles of what Latinos are facing here, especially with the influx of families coming from Puerto Rico. So if we could work better, you know, the Black and Brown community together, we are stronger. And we've proven, you know, that was loud and clear yesterday. So if we could just get better at that and, you know, just know that I'm always here. I'm very grassroots. Even before I was elected, I was out there for 15 years. So just, you know, reach out and I will be more than happy to be there and just, you know, just to help, just to kind of bridge those gaps and bring those communities together.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Congrats, Councilman Jones.
Councilwoman Santana, you sound like the Stacey Abrams of Cleveland. You did a great job, and thank you so much for your leadership, Councilwoman. I'm gonna move to a vote, but before I move to a vote, I want to remind everybody that you have to be present on the screen in order for your vote to count. And right now, I know we have Councilman Conwell that's not on, but I do want to give a couple of his comments. Right now, Councilman Conwell is asked to be registered as a no vote. He has some concerns that he wants to talk with Chief Martin about regarding culture and regarding the amount of African-American people from the health department who he feels were not treated fairly, and he wants clarification and some other assurances about this position before he moves forward to support that. So even though he's not on to be counted as a vote, I wanted to make sure that his point was heard. And please, if we could, Chief Martin Thompson, he has a great relationship with you and Mayor Jackson, but he wants more clarification. And unfortunately, due to technology issues, he's not able to get on, but he has sent me messages that he does want to make sure that he knows, the administration knows he does have some concerns. However, with that being said,
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I did get a clarification on the previous question, whether we needed to amend it. Probably the best practice would be to amend it. It's in the title caption. So proposing an amendment of, in the title, line 2, strike equality and insert equity. So we could have a motion on that. And then
I can make a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move to make that amendment.
Second that.
So we have a move by a motion made by Councilman McCormick and is seconded by Councilman.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? The ayes have it. So the motion carries. Okay.
Thank you.
That being said, hearing no more questions about ordinance number, oops, got to get my technology together. Ordinance number 843, 2020, 2020 passes out of this Health and Human Services Committee. Once again, Chief, if you could please talk to Councilman Conwell before Finance Committee, I will have a follow-up conversation as well. But this will move to the Finance Committee and committee as a whole. I just want to give everybody a brief lesson as we pass this. In the 1940s, the oldest government-funded human relations committee in the United States was funded for the Community Relations Board here in the city of Cleveland. It was funded because of the late W.O. Walker, and Perk at the time had a committee that came out of the health department to deal with inequalities, dealing with race and gender and other issues in our society. So as the saying goes, sometimes the more things change, the more they stay the same. But we're here on council really to try to make this policy and this statement work. This is going to be the issue of the day. You've heard it on the presidential stage. You've heard it echo through our country. You've heard it manifest in the frustrations of people in our community through civil unrest and other activities and actions. You've also seen the passions on all sides around this. But this issue regarding eliminating and mitigating factors of racism is critical to our system. And we thank everybody for supporting this position. And all I would ask Chief Martin is, I'm going to work closely with Councilman Bashir Jones. I would love for him to be a part of any panels or anything that you have regarding this to examine a potential candidate for this office. And I really would love for you and him to connect because as Chair of Health, I'm pretty much going to turn over all of those things related to this topic to Councilman Jones, and he'll be the point person that'll be working with this commissioner and everybody on this. Councilman Jones, are you okay with that? Is he froze? Councilman Jones, did you hear me? Are you okay with that? He'll be okay with that. Councilman Jones will be working closely with you already, okay? He told me earlier he's good with that.
Okay.
So that being said, I have no other questions. This Committee of Health and Human Services is adjourned. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you at our next scheduled meeting.
Great job.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.